The United Nations has named 2015 to 2024 as the International Decade for People of African Descent. The United Church of Canada and the United Church of Christ have committed to be engaged in this international decade by working in partnership to address the manifestations and impact of racism globally. What is the decade about? There are about 200 million people of African descent who live in the Americas, in Canada, and the U.S. African descendant people experience higher rates of poverty, poor health, lower educational attainment, and experience mass incarceration at higher rates than other ethnic groups. There are many inequalities faced by people of African descent in North America and around the world. The United Nations names these inequities because they are linked to systemic racism and the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade. In proclaiming the decade, the international community is saying that people of African descent are a distinct group whose human rights must be promoted and protected. And how might you become involved? The International Decade for People of African Descent calls for recognition, justice, and continuous development. The decade also calls for church and society to improve the human rights situation and the well-being of people of African descent. It calls for nations to take practical actions to combat racism and racial discrimination. Churches and church organizations around the world are already involved. The World Council of Churches and the Council for World Mission are among those who have also committed to this work. What can you do? Explore the website for the United Nations International Decade for People of African Descent. Look for more educational resources about the decade and commit to engaging the decade throughout the year. More information will be coming soon regarding the decade. Begin sharing this information with your local church today and get involved.